Okay, what's up, guys? As promised, I'd start posting more like competitive videos and stuff like that, and like I want to kind of like, address one of the biggest misconceptions that you find amongst like especially newer players and people just starting off in competitive, and that is this misconception about like Landers and kind of how it boils down into like viability and usage. So I mean, if you're unfamiliar with things, I mean, even if you don't really know much about competitive, like you should know by now that Landorus-T, when it's allowed, it's one of the most commonly used mods. And like as you see here, like for Smogon OU, it is ranked number one. And Peakalytics, which compiles like VGC data, its number was at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 with 20%. And I think for was it for Smogon singles 28. And like the thing is, like a lot of people fall under the misconception that like because it's used on a lot of teams that it's broken, which really isn't the case because like usage doesn't really indicate viability. It doesn't mean that this thing is the most broken mon. Like if you had to say what was better than Lando, it would be Magerna. You'd probably say Clef is even better than Lando. And I'm speaking in terms of singles. And the reason why I say that is because like Lando T is just a very splashable bond. And when I mean splashable, I'm saying that it can be used on a multitude of teams and it can fill a bunch of different roles. And I can show you some examples. And this is singles, and if you go to OU, it's got different sets. It's got Choice Scarf, it's got Swords Dance, it's got the Suicide Lead, got defensive. And like I said, it can fill a bunch of different roles. And that might make people think like, okay, so it can do everything. So why is it not something that people want banned or it's broken? Because it really does not have it's honestly pretty predictable. Like if you look at these sets, almost every single one, has Earthquake. That's pretty much mandatory. Earthquake, Stone Edge, and then after that, the rest of the moves are kind of filler depending on the set and the spread. And if you look at it here, you see like it'll run like U-turn, knockoff, Stone Edge or SD, Stealth Rocks, it only really runs these certain few moves. And if you look in like Smogan or whatever, and as well as VGC, a lot of like common mons kind of handle it well. Like Clef, it has to, if it's Scarf or defensive, it can't two hit KO Clef. Pheromosa, it can't really beat Pheromosa 1v1 because sometimes Pheromosas carry Ice Beam, knocks Lando right out. Urshifu. Urshifu, it kind of checks Urshifu a bit, but it doesn't really want to be in front of Urshifu too much, depending on like the situation. And then you got Pharaoh. So Pharaoh can switch into most Lando attacks and just kind of like wool it down with like either knockoff, leech seed, gyro ball, stuff like that, and get up on hazards on it. But also at the same time, like Lando can set up on it. Then you got Magearna. Magearna really honestly does get checked by Lando. Tox gets checked by Lando. Zapdos to a degree, depending on like if it's an offensive variant because of Stone Age. Heatran and then Spectier can kind of just like Lando doesn't really want to switch in. And that's just like the common examples. I mean, some of these ones at the bottom here, like Lando doesn't really like just outright destroy a lot of these. And that's the misconception because people see like, yeah, it's used a lot, so it's broken. And it's almost similar things to like VGC because you had Urshifu. It's almost the same example. And also VGC, like there's less brokenness because like double targeting exists and like all the other stuff. Tapu Fini handles Lando pretty well. Regieleki, I mean, does not want to deal with Lando or any ground type really. Kartana doesn't really want to deal with Lando too much. Incineroar, I mean, it can drop some intimidates, maybe get a fake out. Glastier can handle Lando. So it's like, and a lot of people see like, okay, it's on every team, it's broken. And that's like, it's the biggest misconception in this entire game because, like I said, when it comes to its moveset, it's, it runs pretty much very standard movesets. And it's even worse this gen compared to last gen because one of the best Lando T switch ins is Lando T. And like now with Hidden Power gone, you can't just hidden power ice opposing Lando T. And a lot of common defensive mons like can check it. Because a lot of people think like, okay, it's centralizing. Like nobody, I mean, basic team building, you already account for Lando T in certain roles on your team. Like I mean, like stuff like having a ground resist or immunity, um, which is like basic on every team. Like if you don't have that, you don't just lose Lando T, kind of you lose the sand, stuff like that. So it's kind of basic team building. So if like Lando T just really shreds your entire team, then you probably should make a better team, in all honesty. It's the same thing for like Clef. Like if Clef shreds your entire team, build a better team. Like because this thing is covered by basic fundamentals of like team building. Especially from like team preview, it's pretty easy to identify what set Lando T is. If like depending on like your level of experience. Like you might not be able to pinpoint the exact set, but you can probably nail it down to one or two, depending on like the surrounding mons. But like I said, I mean, if you look at HP, it's, I mean, yeah, its attack is 145, which is pretty high. And like it has all around solid base stats, but still, even with all that power, it's just it doesn't really do as much as people think. Like if you wanted to, if Lando T and the normal Lando had the same like capabilities, then that would be different. Because Lando base is better than Lando T. It's just not as splashable on teams, but it's so much better. Like if you play Smogan, then you know that like Lando T, I mean Lando I doesn't last very long. Let me go to the Sun and Moon sets to kind of show you guys. Get rid of that because you get what's that? Hidden Power Ice, and with Sheer Force plus Life Orb, it almost two hit KOs the entire meta. Like it's that good. Like even let's pull a monotype set. I wish I had better sets on here I could really demonstrate. So like Earth Power. Because it gets the sheer force, life orb boost, two hit KOs almost everything. Sludge Wave, Focus Blast. And then sometimes they run Psychic. There isn't really a safe switch in except for like Chansey, Blissey. That's pretty much really it. So if you really want to say which Lando was broken, it's pretty much this one. This one can be revenge killed, obviously, but when it comes to having switch ins and stuff, this one is the most broken compared to Lando T. Lando T, like I said, with basic team building, it has multiple switch ins. It has a lot of counterplay. It's just number one because, like I said, it can do a lot of stuff. And that's, I mean, it's not, it's not broken. Like I said, I mean, it's kind of hard, especially for me being like more experienced, to kind of like put myself in those shoes of saying like Lando T is broken. But like, I can read you an example of something that was posted last night on Facebook because I saw a guy that was actually suggesting that Lando T was broken. I'm not gonna post his name up here or anything like that because I ain't. I'm not that much of a douche. It wasn't really what inspired me to make this, but like I've seen the argument several times. Where is it? Because the guy was basically saying, and this was when the post about Pheromosa's suspect test came up. He was like, $10 says they still ignore Lando T despite him seeing more play with a broader moveset. And the thing's like, that's a complete lie. Lando, like I said before, Lando T is worse this gen than last gen because it lacks HP ice. And it lacks Z moves too. It's always going to be a good splashable mod, but it's actually worse this gen. And like I was like, they're never banning Lando T. He said, despite Lando T seeing consistent more play and having a variety of builds, that makes him impossible to predict. We can say it's bias. It's quite obvious. There is no bias towards Lando T. Because like I said before, these are the only things it really runs. Choice Scarf, I mean, it runs a pretty standard set. I mean, I'm on Sun and Moon, but let's go back to Sword and Shield. I hate saying Sword and Shield. You got Choice Scarf, you got Swords Dance, you got the Suicide Lead, and you got Defensive. And like, I mean, looking at these sets, I mean, what about these makes it broken? I mean, the Swords Dance is up here, but there's also a double dance, and it's Swords Dance, Rock Polish, Earthquake, Stone Edge. But that set is hard to get up, and like if you are able to get up, it takes like maybe 2, 3 turns building it up. But I mean, if you are in that good position to do that. That doesn't really make it broken because it's a 2 to 3 turn setup. But like I said, nothing here makes it broken. And like I said, it has less tools at its disposal compared to last gen. And I'll read you the rest. I was like, so there's no bias. Its usage isn't indicative of him being a centralized or overpowered mod. And centralized basically means like people have to bring certain things to account for it in team building. But the thing is, like I said before, Lando T is already accounted for in basic team building. And I think a lot of people just really don't seem to get that. And then I said Lando T is very versatile in terms of roles and splashable, but he's easily predictable, and it's not an issue of him running moves to wear out normal checks. And exactly, like he only really runs these three things. I mean, yeah, he's more versatile in the terms of roles. I mean, like you can have him as speed control with choice scarf, a pivot, and then a rock setter, then a suicide lead, stuff like that. That's what we mean in your sweeper role. That's what we mean by versatility in terms of roles. We don't mean versatility in terms of move sets to where you're like, oh man, he's going to either, like, nothing really safely switches in. Because, like I said, if you don't have a ground immunity, remake your team. Remake your team completely. Because, like I said before, that means you lose to sand as well. And so then if like I said before, if Lando I and Lando T shared the same like kind of stat distribution, move pool, and abilities, then the thing will be broken. Because like I said, Lando I is the broken one. Lando T is just splashable. But I mean, I don't really know what else to really show you guys, but that's like there's no reason to be scared of Lando T. I think it's because it's like people don't like seeing it used a lot, and because it's legendary, that kind of gives it that bad stigma. But I mean, just look at what it runs and tell me, does this really seem like a scary broken mod when it can only really run, honestly, Earthquake, Stone Edge, Knock Off, and U-Turn consistently? That's it. So I mean, you got stuff like Slowbro, he'll still switch in. Tapu Fini will still switch in. So you got to really kind of think about it that like there's a lot that can handle Lando T. It's just if you're building a solid, fundamentally sound team, even like not a not so good team can handle Lando T well. But that's all we got. All we have. Let me know what you think about Lando T. I mean, off your opinions and everything else. I mean, I'd love to hear it. If your first time watching, like, subscribe, like all that other fun stuff. But that's all I gotta say about Lando T. And that Lando T is not broken.